it's winning Monday. It's been almost a doggone 3 to 4 months before we can say that. The last Monday win was against the Carolina Panthers on a late second field goal. So this is going to be something we're going to relish in. Come on in. We got John Kosko of Pro Football Focus, as always, with us after a win on a Monday. It feels good. We'll talk about the offense. Who did what? Amari Cooper seemed to step up. Never know really until we get into the grades, but offensive grades up front, offensive grades on the outside, and the running game. Also, we'll get to defense. Hey, you guys happy? Myles Garrett finally showed up when it counted. He got a big-time sack. We'll talk about that. We'll see who had the highest grade on defense. We'll talk about how they were able to slow down Tom Brady a little bit. And then we get to open our presents. We get to get to the treats and the toys in the third segment. We'll take some of your calls, take some of your chats, and we'll talk about Deshaun Watson coming back into the fold, what to expect, what to look for, what does the offense look like, and will the Cleveland Browns be able to get a win, most importantly, to extend this to a 2-game winning streak against the Houston Texans. We'll do that all coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things dog pound LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And it's long, my good friend Garrett Bush actually forgot the term Victory Monday. It's Victory Monday. Look, you got to cut Garrett some slack. We ain't done this since September 12th. September 12th. Obviously, the Browns' other 2 wins this season, Thursday Night Football, Halloween against the Bengals. But a big one yesterday. I know a lot of people obviously have their eyes towards the Browns' next 6 games, and certainly within reason. But yesterday was a big one. I mean, Jacoby Brissett, for everything he's done for this franchise, and it was good to get Jacoby out. One of the things we talked about with Jacoby, never put him in the position like he was in yet. Well, guess what? For yesterday, it worked out. Threw one. I love the ball when you're throwing it to the crossbar. You got an athlete that can things other guys can't. David Njoku, magical one-handed catch. Browns defense, we've talked about this a lot. They were a 22.5-minute team a lot of weeks. Yesterday, not only 60 minutes, played near 68 minutes yesterday in a big victory in overtime over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. Garrett Bush, at GBush91. We are joined today, as you guys know, when we go for the post-game show, John Kosko on the offensive side, defensive side. Of course, we're going to talk about, and look, I phrased it like this. I'm going to continue to phrase it. This should be the greatest error of the Cleveland Browns football, period. It's the way it should be. Let's see if it happens. Today's episode of Locked On Browns is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You can pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than the Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com. Promo code Locked On. As we said, it was a fun one yesterday. Browns get out early, which they seem to do. Tampa Bay, I don't know if anybody really wants to talk about it. Tampa Bay maybe else, but this is a team where, maybe Tom should have stayed at home. I'm not talking about his personal life. I'm talking about his play on the field. Tampa Bay certainly struggling there on that side of the ball. John, but you got Nick Chubb going back yesterday. You got Amari Cooper going yesterday. David Njoku with a big catch, which, if you're fantasy-wise, probably upped what you got from David Njoku yesterday. You were able to find, a way to get Anthony Schwartz involved. And, for time he's been here, look at McCole Hardman. I'm not saying he's going to be McCole Hardman. That's the type of guy you want to use. You want to use that speed. You want to use that diversity against another team's defense. They found a way to do that. John, Jacoby's going to close here, and I guess it's a top 10 overall grade he'll finish with after 11 games as this team's starter. And when you talk about going with a backup quarterback for that lengthy period of a time, I mean, that is more than you can ask for and then some.
Yeah, I mean he's done obviously really well for himself in these 11 games, and I really couldn't ask much more from a guy of his caliber. He's a guy that coming into the season last year he had had his highest graded season ever, which was a 76, and he just built upon that. And this year was an 82 overall. Utilized his rushing ability that he has, and I think from a schematic standpoint, this scheme really fits what he does well. And so he made the most of it. So with he's, like I said, an 82.5 overall this season. This past game was a 73.7, which was good enough to win it for them. And I think, you look at what he's done, for over the course of the 11 games, probably good enough play to get them to be in consideration to win a lot of games. But you talk about the stretch runs where they needed to clutch up. They finally clutched up yesterday. They hadn't been able to do that from pretty much for the last 9 games or whatever it was. So I think for him it was a great way to send off. And is he a starting quarterback in the NFL? If you're a starting quarterback in the NFL, maybe you win a couple more of those games, but I think he's definitely given himself a good shot to earn one of these starting quarterback positions, which will open up in the offseason. So kudos to him for a great year for him in a generally down year that it's been for quarterbacks overall.
Well, John, I was just about to ask you that question. I do think as well that he made himself some money. I think, the Browns would like to bring him back, but I think when you look at the starting quarterbacks in the league, you can't tell me that Jacoby Brissett doesn't look pretty good to a Jets team. Jacoby Brissett wouldn't look good, even in some places, even in Detroit, other places like that. I think he's played well enough to get himself in a mix, even if he's not the flat-out starter, for a guy that they can bring in to compete with as well going into the season for another organization. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Buccaneers game. It was a sloppy game, sloppy track, but I think the Cleveland Browns did themselves some good. They did some good things out there that really got them to win. Nick Chubb got over 20 carries. Those 20 carries, we know what the record is. When your man Nick Chubb get over 20 carries, you already know they're undefeated. That streak still happens. Amari Cooper dropped a big 4th down, which I thought was going to really come back and haunt him. He came back and redeemed himself, came back again, caught the next pass thrown to him, as well had the long run to set up the Nick Chubb run. When you look at the offense, who really stood out to you as far as the top performers according to PFF?
Yeah, it's an interesting one from an offensive perspective because I don't think there were any. There were a lot of mistakes that happened. Like you talk about the Amari Cooper drop. That was a big drop in the game. David Njoku had a drop earlier in the game. He was actually kind of poor in pass protection. He was asked to do that, but like obviously Njoku in the 4th quarter, he was actually phenomenal. The highest graded player in the 4th quarter in overtime for the Cleveland Browns with a 90.0 grade there. So I think overall, I don't think anybody played spectacularly. That kind of shows out in the grades. Highest graded player actually was Jacoby Brissett at a 73.7 in this game. Because I think what you saw is an inconsistent performance from the team. They talked about it on the broadcast for 40 plus minutes of the game. The Browns didn't score, and it really came down to scoring a touchdown with 30 seconds left in the regulation, and then obviously punching in overtime. And so you had some big plays that obviously Amari Cooper had in overtime, and David Njoku's catch, and Nick Chubb had some timely runs. But I think for a large part of the game, it was pretty lackluster for them, and that kind of shows out in the grades.
There's no question about that. And that's, I think, what makes yesterday's win as impressive as it was. And it wasn't a story we haven't seen before. Browns come out, they get competitive. Then when the other team's offense seems to, change the score in their favor, we get a little nervous about where the defense is as far as a collective unit. Not necessarily the case yesterday. You got some truly, some inspiring performances from some guys we really haven't gotten to see. We're going to get to that obviously here as we flip it up here and go to the defensive side of the ball. And if anybody watched the Sunday night game, last night. This was one of the takeaways I have, and they weren't obviously talking about Jacoby Brissett, but it was in regards to Jacoby Brissett, is what do you do when you have that quarterback who isn't also the athlete? I mean, because we're trending to this way now in the NFL. I mean, all the best quarterbacks, the Mahomeses of the world, obviously the Josh Allen, mobility is a huge, huge part of their game. And they were talking about that. And that's kind of the point I'm getting to with Jacoby Brissett. For Jacoby, it's just something he doesn't have. So, a lot of times it takes, a lot of things to go perfectly right for him to succeed, due to the fact that he can't just bail out and say, well, I see 12 yards over there to the right that nobody's covering. I'm going to go pick up a first down, move the sticks. And, you see that with a lot of top quarterbacks here in the league today. But I mean, everything you could have asked for, 4-7, obviously, even if it was just 5-6, you take back the Jet game, even if it was 5-6, that's a hell of a job. And, you probably put, Deshaun Watson, it'll now be on him, to make this interesting. Either way or not, people are going to be excited for this next 6 weeks. You want to see what you have in Deshaun Watson. The key of this also is, Deshaun Watson needs to play well. This team needs to show well. So you got people who are potential free agents in 2023 going, all right, yeah, I like the way that's looking. Yeah, all right, let's go. Give me a shout. I'm interested. We're going to get to the defensive side of the ball here. John Kosko joining Jeff Lloyd, Garrett Bush, your latest Locked on Brown. This episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. Find Block Forever now wherever you get your podcast. Block Forever is a brand new podcast from former NFL pro Ryan Khalil and Audible. Khalil takes the conversation about football to the next level. He sits down with star players, coaches, and former pros across the league to get real about what happens on the field and behind the scene, and most certainly inside the locker rooms during team meetings, and certainly back at the hotel as well. You'll hear Christian McCaffrey talk about his love-hate relationship with fantasy football. Juju Smith-Schuster give his most honest questions on other players and positions within the league. Catch the full Block Forever series available anywhere you get your podcast. Available everywhere now. Audible. Get in the game.
Welcome back to the Locked On Browns podcast. G. Bush, Jeff Lloyd, John Kosko. Browns victory Monday. We'll take that victory. Browns now move to 4-7. And what the crazy part about this game was, they did it against Tom Brady, who had never been come from behind on with a 7 point
7-0 with 2 minutes to go. Yep.
Crazy. And to be able to do that, to go 4-7, the thing that it does is it gives us a little bit of hope, gives us a little bit of interest when we're watching the team moving forward. And especially since you're getting a new quarterback in Deshaun Watson, who you think can elevate the team, you're going to want to stay abreast on all things happening with the Cleveland Browns. And the best way to do that is to check out the Locked On Browns podcast. You can subscribe to the channel on YouTube, which you're watching that right now. Thank you for those 47 people watching on YouTube. Also, there are some individuals that watch strictly or listen strictly on podcasts. You can download the Locked On Browns podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we are on the new Roku app. If you have a Roku app, make sure you check us out. You can download that Roku app and we'll be on there as well. Locked On Cleveland Sports, we're on that as well. And continue to support us across all the platforms. We really do appreciate it. We talked about a little bit about the offense first segment. Let's get into the defense a little bit. Joe Woods was much maligned over the course of this. I think the first half of the season, a little stretch past that. We got on him about not really blitzing, not doing too much to affect quarterbacks. I actually thought the Browns defense played pretty well. There was an opportunity, I thought, after the first quarter or so. I thought the Buccaneers were really moving the football on the ground a lot, and I was like, oh, goodness. They had the rookie White moving the ball. They moved the ball well, and I thought this was going to be just another case of the Browns not being able to stop the run. However, Tom Brady came out after that first quarter and threw the ball a lot to Mike Evans, a lot of other places. I thought a couple people really showed up. MJ Emerson, to me, I've been saying, has played like the Browns' best corner. We'll see what John Kosko thinks as far as his grade. I thought Myles Garrett pretty much playing with one arm did some really good things to get sacks in big opportune times to take Tom Brady off the field. And I thought for the most part, the Browns did a decent or a much better job than they have been doing in not allowing huge runs and run after catch. John, what are your thoughts on defense? Who stepped up and what grades did you see on that defensive end of the football?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good performances out there. Even Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who is the highest graded defender for us in that game, he had 83.6 in the game. Coverage wise, he was an 83.1. Was really good all over the field. Had a pass breakup. He gave up a couple of catches and all, but I think he had a lot of tackles and coverage that would make him stops, and he did a good job out there. Myles Garrett, you talked about it in the opening segment. He finally showed up when it mattered, which is kind of a nod to all the fans that don't think he steps up in the biggest moments. Well, he clearly did in this game with 2 sacks. His grade in the fourth quarter was an 88, and put to 2 sacks, had four wins on top of that, a hit and a hurry. So he was all over the place in the fourth quarter. And then you talk about Martin Emerson, or I guess he's now called MJ Emerson. He was really good. Obviously against Mike Evans, he targeted 7 times, gave up 0 catches, which is, I mean, you can't really ask much more for a guy to shut down the opposing team's best receiver. So he was excellent out there. He had the not every play was a forcing completion. So a part of it is like, he was maybe in position to make a play on it. That's getting a good grade there. If you're not making a play on the ball, obviously you can't get a high grade when you're not making a play on the ball. But if like Tom Brady overthrows an open receiver, I think that that did happen one time there, and he was called for a pass interference. It does knock down your grade a bit. So grade wise, it doesn't look great at like a 66.3, but I think you'll take what he did in that game all day, every day.
Special talent, and I think there's no question he's been the most consistent cornerback for this team this season. This is one, John, I do want to get to here. With Greg Newsome being out, and the Browns are in this difficult spot where they're basically trying to make a nickel, trying to find somebody to be the nickel. And you ask anybody who's ever played it, it's really difficult to go inside where there is so much congestion when you're accustomed to being on the outside. Plus you got that, lovely little sideline there, which you can kind of use to your advantage. Don't really work that way in the slot. Thomas Graham, this is a player I loved a couple of years ago coming out of Oregon. He was the guy that missed 2020, didn't play his last college season in Oregon due to COVID. But one thing Thomas Graham does is Thomas Graham's a nickel. He is a natural nickel by trait. He's, did it at Oregon. He's by far the smallest corner of the Browns guys who plays. He's smaller than AJ Green. He's smaller, probably about Denzel's side. I would say we all know Denzel's not going anywhere. But he got some reps yesterday, John. And the key to defensive back play is, look, you understand completions are going to be had, completions are going to be gotten. But the key is that's it, no more. It's okay that you get it. And a player like Chris Godwin, who makes his living on a high amount of receptions, whatever production he turns them into. But I really thought Thomas Graham yesterday kind of just getting thrown out there because, we knew Newsome was out. AJ Green ended up in the concussion protocol. But a guy who got an opportunity here. And, I don't know how it's going to work out going further. But this is a guy that certainly can help in that spot.
Yeah, think about it, too. So last year he played for Chicago. Only had 112 snaps, but he was a very, very good defender on those 112 snaps. He was an 84.5 grade, had 90.6 in coverage, had a couple 4 pass breakups, and allowed 5 catches on 10 targets, which is good solid numbers on a small sample size. This game he gave up 6 for 6, which is obviously, like, from a stat perspective is not great, but only 34 yards. Had 2 stops, so 2 of the the catches he allowed, he made the stop for for a short gain, which are essentially positive plays for the defense, and his overall grade came out to a 70.7. So he was active and always around the ball. It's not like he was getting beat like crazy or anything like that. When he did give it the catch, he was right there in position. So had a solid game, and I think if the Browns would be wise to keep him there and see what they've got moving forward, because you're right. Playing in that nickel role is much more difficult than if you've never played it than it is to play outside. Like Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome, they've always been on the outside, and they've been really good players on the outside. So trying to put them into the slot against quicker, shiftier type guys potentially is a difficult task. So I liked what I saw from Thomas Grand, and I know that like you and Pete loved him coming out a few years ago. So I think we'll see what he can become, because I think he can be a good player for the Browns if he shows what he did yesterday.
Really
got
quick,
some.
Kosko.
Go ahead.
Let me ask you this question, because people have been asking me left and right about this with Greg Newsome. Is it just the fact that is Greg Newsome not as good as MJ Emerson on the outside, so by default he's playing inside, or do you think the Browns naturally saw him as an inside type guy, and that's just where he needs to get adjusted to?
No, I think they kind of say, hey, of our guys, our top three guys here, who's the best suited to play inside, right? And it's Newsome. I think that's what they do, and I think you think about it too. So like Newsome is pretty young in terms of like if you're going to put Ward or Newsome there, Newsome doesn't have as many reps on the outside saying, hey, it's ingrained into this guy's system that he's going to be an outside corner and only an outside corner. Like, I don't think you can put Denzel into the slot very often and expect him to be, the franchise cornerback you'd expect him to be. You'd love him to be able to do that, but I don't think he's developed those skills. Newsome's still raw and young in terms of his experience that you can do that with him. I think like Martin Emerson did play in the slot in college last year, but he's not suited to play in the slot. That's just not what his body style is at all. He'd be a great outside cornerback. Like you're talking about a guy that's 6'3", what is he, 210 or something like that? Like just super long and lanky, but he's big along with that. He's not really lanky. He's just like long and big, but he's got the moves of like a shorter, smaller guy that can play on the outside. So I think you got to, develop those skills, because they're not suited to play into the slot unless you were to say, hey, we want you to be a big safety, like a Cam Chancellor type or something like that. But that's not as valuable as what he can do on the outside if he's shutting down like a Mike Evans or whatever. So that's why I think they put Newsome out the inside. He's not the lesser of the three or anything like that. It's just he's most suited to be that.
I also think where John's going with this wasn't ever going to be a spot for Denzel Ward. It wasn't. Once Denzel Ward signed that contract extension and Denzel's injury history. So the last thing you want to do is have him, near more fire. You look at Emerson, long, lanky. You look at Newsome, a little bit more short, compact. It's kind of an easy decision. And the fact that Martin Emerson is balling out like he is on the outside probably makes it, even easier for the Browns to at least try this. Look, and keep in mind, this is for the next 6 weeks. I mean, we still, have no certainty of Joe Woods and if you're here. So this could be the way they're going to play it for now. But we can't guarantee, when, new sheriff comes to town, what exactly his thought process is going to be. Brian, Deion Jones, Chase Winovich, I've seen enough to know I've seen too much. So that's the conversation we got going on over there. We're going to flip it up here. Look, he's here. It's official. He's on the roster. Josh Dobbs has been released. The Deshaun Watson era starts. It starts as soon as Wednesday. When this team walks out to the practice field, the Browns think they have their guy, the guy that can be mentioned with the Patrick Mahomeses of the world, the Josh Allens of the world. The Browns think they have that. So 6 games to go here. We don't know what the future holds. I'm not necessarily looking for a playoff run here. What I'm looking to make sure is that the Browns got the guy they think they got. And you know what? Yeah, there's going to be some rust here in a second. But, I mean, you want to shake off some rust. Bring me to Houston Texans every day, all day and every day, so to speak here. Jeff Lloyd, Garrett Bush, your latest Locked On Browns. Our guy John Kosko in for the ride. This pod is brought to you by the good folks over at Prize Picks. Daily fantasy made easy. You got a Monday nighter tonight. I know, Colts, Steelers, who really cares? I don't know what then. That's the best one where you go together. You go out, you put together a lineup full of players. What, Jonathan Taylor? Who do you like for the Pittsburgh wide receiver room? You pick 2 to 5 players. And if they go score more or less than the Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against other people. It is literally you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport you watch. All of the major pro, NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, of course, men's, women, collegiate sports. You can go PL. You can make an entry in 6 or less. It's simple. Safe and fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states in Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. You deposit 100, they give you 100. You deposit 50, they give you 50. Enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100.
Welcome back to the Locked On Browns podcast. G. Bush, John Kosko, Jeff Lloyd. We've talked about the offense, talked about the defense. This segment, we'll get to some of the questions that you guys have. And before we do that, we must say, Deshaun Watson is coming back in. Before we get to you guys, we'll ask John, what do you expect to see from Deshaun Watson? Some people expect to see a little rust. Some people think he's going to come out and be relatively sharp. What do you expect to see from the offense, the differences between what you've seen with Jacoby Brissett, who's played well by all intents and purposes, but what are some of the things that Deshaun Watson can bring to the table that may look a little different from your perspective?
Yeah, I think what we see is probably a player that's going to be maybe a bit rusty in his first game back. He did get some preseason action, which does help. I think the very first play of the preseason, he looked like he was nervous, but then it kind of settled down, even with you're talking about 2 drop passes after the first miss. So like he only went for 2 for 5 in those 5 passes. 4 of them, he should have been able to complete 4 of them. So I think what we'll see from him and from this offense is kind of much of the same that we've been seeing throughout the whole year. I don't think they're going to try to change anything too drastically. I think Stefanski's going to say, hey, let's ease you into this rather than saying, hey, let's throw everything that we've got on the table for you, because you're playing against the Houston Texans. It's not like it's a kitchen sink type game. It's a game that you can get right and make sure that you're on the same page and stuff like that. You still obviously want to go out there and win the game and have a game plan to win it. But I think you're not going to do anything that's going to be detrimental or think that he can't do right off the bat. He hasn't played football in almost 700 days or something like that.
28 games. 28 games.
That's a long time, but I think what we can see from him moving forward is I'd expect him to be able to pick up where he's been able to left off, as a good player. Like he's an excellent player in this NFL. Talk about in 2020, we have our metric of wins above replacement. He was 4.24 wins above replacement in Houston, and if you remember, Houston won 4 games. And that's all because of what he was able to do throwing the ball in that season. And I think players, people should need to understand how good he really was for that team and how bad you can see that team now. Without him, they went, they were the number 3 overall pick last year. They're going to be the number 1 overall pick this year. They're not a good team without him because he was that type that was just basically picking everything up for them. And now what they have. So that's what I would expect from Deshaun Watson.
And
go ahead, Jeff.
Okay,
no,
the thing
ahead.
is, it will be difficult. It's 28 games. It is literally a season and 3 quarters, and then plus you factor in the fact that his last game was obviously January, of the previous year. So that is a absolute long time. I'm not so much concerned about getting back into the groove on the field. I think no one's going to be able to answer this. No one's really going to be able to predict this. But this is more of, what is my name now? What is my reputation? Because, facts are facts. A lot of people think he's the scum of the earth, and he's going to make $238 million guaranteed. So, for him, and it's going to be the part of extra pressure of basically understanding this is a 6-game stretch to close out this year. You're not winning a Super Bowl this year. Go out, do what you got to do. Look the best you can. Let's find out about the receivers after Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Are these guys that are going to suit that? Are these guys that are going to fit the overall success we hope we can get out of a player like Deshaun Watson? I think he'll play extremely well because I'm sure there's some vengeance inside him going back to Houston. Why? I have no idea because he essentially turned his back on them. But there is I'm getting to go back to work. And to not be able to play football, how many times did you have to rehab from something where you were out for a long time? To finally get there, to finally get back, he's literally got to be drooling at the opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the worst places to be where you can't play, can't get yourself involved in things. So, I think he'll be revved up and ready to go, especially going into a hostile environment. We do have our question of the day, and it comes from Pee-wee's Dog Pound. He says, at Locked On Browns, what was the key for Myles Garrett to make an impact yesterday? Was it the D-line finally getting a push up the middle? Your thoughts from this, John?
No, they still didn't get much of a push up the middle. I would say it's mostly Myles Garrett still doing what he does, which is he does get pressure on the quarterback. And the fact is that like he finally just made it home for a couple of sacks in the fourth quarter and overtime. And I think fans look at probably don't look at pressures. Like if the quarterback is able to get rid of the ball, even though he has pressure in his face and completes it, like they don't even think of it as a positive play from that defender. And it's like he did everything he possibly could up until that point. The quarterback threw the ball. There's only so much you can do. You can't get a sack on every single play. So I think for him, he just made the plays when they mattered. And I think he's done that throughout his career, and then also this season. It just happens to be that fans only look at have a recency bias on that.
104 people in here as so far. I think we cracked 100. We'll continue to try to do this. I think we're going to ramp it up here a little bit because basically this is a brand new team, brand new quarterback. I think you'll see new plays. I think you're going to have a new invigorate, they're going to be a new energy level around the Browns. So we'll see that number. I think this number will creep up. We'll continue to do it around 2:00 and try to get you guys in here live. We appreciate you guys checking in. All those that hit that like button, we appreciate you, and subscribe to the channel. Jeff, take us on out of here, man.
Look, whatever happens over the next 6 weeks, this team's they're not going to play out the string. That's what's going to be exciting here. And, hey, if the Browns end up having to play some spoiler, go ahead, play some spoiler. Let's see what we got here. But for one, number 4 has got here to close out this season. He is Garrett Bush, Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, Monday through Friday, 11 to 1. Check it out. Obviously, Cavs, Browns, now Watson, a lot going on. Guardians, we'll see what they can do in the offseason. Make sure you're checking that out. The Barbershop, 92.3 The Fan, on Saturday mornings, 8 to noon. Make sure you're checking that out. Pre-game, post-game. Buckeyes, Browns, of course, Cavaliers. At G Bush, myself, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd, at Locked On Browns. Make sure you follow that account as well. John Kosko at John Kosko 3 joins us weekly from PFF. We get to talk, about each individual game, break it down here, some thoughts about the team, and now, where this team is headed, where they think they finally have their quarterback who is on the upper echelon of the other players in the NFL. We will be here all week. We are very, very excited, for what is to come here for the Cleveland Browns. All that coming around here. Make sure you're on Locked On Browns. We appreciate everyone who makes it their first listen, whether it's audio, whether it's video, whether it's Roku. Go ahead and check it out. We appreciate you all so much. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go, Browns.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.